Welcome back, Lincoln currency. When people think about the most ordinary coin in America, their minds usually go straight to the penny, the 1-cent coin, that tiny copper-colored disc that seems so insignificant most of the time, tossed into jars, slipped under couch cushions, scattered in parking lots as if it has almost no value at all. But when you pause for just a moment and look closely, the penny, especially one specific penny like the 1994 Lincoln cent, tells a much bigger story. A story of history, art, design, technology, and in some cases, even dreams of unimaginable fortune. The 1994 penny is at first glance just one of billions produced, weighing in at about 2.5 grams, struck in copper-plated zinc, with the familiar bust of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse, the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse, and a tiny mint mark just beneath the year that tells you it came from the Denver Mint, that bold little D standing as its symbol of origin. Now, the facts are straightforward enough. The 1994 Lincoln cent was minted in the millions, in fact hundreds of millions, and for most people it is simply pocket change. The composition had long since changed from the nearly pure copper coins of earlier generations to a core of zinc with just a thin shell of copper cladding, a change made in the early 1980s to save the government money as copper prices rose. That means the coin feels a little different than the older pre-1982 cents. It sounds different when you drop it on a table. It has its own unique lifespan and circulation. Yet, as with so many objects that seem common, the 1994 penny has inspired a swirl of stories about value, rarity, and hidden treasure, with whispers in the collector world and the online rumor mill suggesting that a single example could be worth hundreds, even millions, or as some viral claims insist, a staggering $653 million. Now, if you pause right there, your rational mind probably laughs a little. How could a coin worth 1 cent possibly be valued at more than the GDP of a small nation? And you're right, the everyday 1994 penny rattling around in a cup holder or rolling across a laundry room floor isn't going to pay off your mortgage, and it isn't going to make you an overnight billionaire. But the legend of the rare penny, the dream of the ordinary turned extraordinary, has always captured people's imaginations. That's part of what makes coin collecting so addictive, so magnetic. Every small coin in your hand carries a potential mystery. And if we peel back the layers, we can understand why this particular year, this particular mint mark, and this particular design resonate with collectors, historians, and casual treasure hunters alike. Start with the design. The Lincoln cent has been around since 1909, the first regular-issue U.S. coin to feature a real person, and not just any person but Abraham Lincoln himself, the 16th president, a figure synonymous with unity, leadership, and the long struggle for freedom in America. The artist Victor David Brenner designed that original portrait, a right-facing bust of Lincoln with a solemn but thoughtful expression, details of his beard captured in sharp lines. By 1994, that design had been in use for 85 years, though with some small modifications over time. The reverse still displayed the Lincoln Memorial, a design introduced in 1959 to commemorate Lincoln's 150th birthday, created by engraver Frank Gasparo. That memorial, in its tiny etched form, even included a minuscule representation of the seated statue of Lincoln that you can just barely glimpse between the pillars if you look with a magnifying glass. The weight of 2.5 grams, the diameter of 19 millimeters, the thickness of 1.52 millimeters, all of it added up to a physical token that is small but sturdy, familiar in the hand, and instantly recognizable across generations. The mint mark, in this case the D, situates the coin geographically. The Denver Mint, one of the key facilities of the U.S. mint system, has churned out billions of coins over the decades, each stamped with that little letter. Collectors look closely at mint marks, because sometimes variations, errors, or unusual conditions create dramatic differences in value. A misplaced mint mark, a doubled strike, a die crack, a weak impression, suddenly a coin that should be worth only face value becomes something far more desirable. And so when you mention the 1994 penny, the conversation inevitably turns not just to the common coin, but to the chance, however slim, that your coin is not like all the others, that it carries some flaw, some rarity, some twist of minting history that elevates it into the realm of valuable collectibles. The idea of a coin worth $653 million is almost certainly more folklore than fact, a viral exaggeration that spread through social media posts and clickbait headlines. Yet the persistence of the rumor reveals something profound about how people relate to money and to objects of history. People want to believe that there might be a hidden treasure hiding in plain sight, that maybe the coin in their pocket is the golden ticket, the miracle find, the path from ordinary life to extraordinary wealth. This is why coin collecting thrives, why entire TV shows, auction houses, and YouTube channels exist around coins. Each coin is a story, and each story has the potential to turn the ordinary into the legendary. To put things in perspective, most 1994 D pennies in circulated condition are worth exactly 1 cent. Some may be worth a few cents more to collectors who want uncirculated or higher grade examples, especially those preserved in mint sets or proof-like conditions. A coin graded MS65 or higher by a professional service like PCGS or NGC might bring a couple of dollars, sometimes more, because collectors will pay for quality, sharp strikes, and attractive luster. Era coins from 1994, particularly from Denver, can fetch higher premiums. A double die obverse, where the date or letters appear double due to a die misalignment, or a dramatic off-center strike, where part of the design is missing, could fetch anywhere from $50 to several $100 depending on severity and condition. But the astronomical number, the fantasy value of hundreds of millions, is more of a story than a reality. Still, the fact that people share that story and pass it along only adds to the mystique. When you hold a 1994 D penny in your hand, you are holding a small piece of a much larger tapestry. The year 1994 was itself a fascinating year in American history, a midpoint in the decade of the 90s, a time when technology, culture, and politics were shifting dramatically. Coins minted that year carried the subtle aura of their time, touched by the era of grunge music, the early rise of the internet, the presidency of Bill Clinton, the optimism and turbulence of the late 20th century. To a numismatist, a coin is not just a coin, it is a time capsule, a frozen piece of history, carrying the symbols and materials of the moment when it was struck. The 1994 D penny reflects not only the legacy of Lincoln and the history of the mint, but also the economic realities of its day, the practical switch from copper to zinc, the mass production processes that turned out billions of identical coins, and the global context in which people lived, worked, and dreamed, and the symbols themselves deserve reflection. Lincoln's portrait is not just decoration. It is a statement about what America values, about leadership, sacrifice, and unity. The words, "In God we trust," arching over the top, "Liberty," placed to the side, and the date anchoring the bottom left, these are reminders of ideals, of philosophical anchors that the nation has wanted to express through its coinage. On the reverse, the Lincoln Memorial is not only an image of a building in Washington, D.C., but also a monument to memory, to the enduring legacy of a man whose words and actions helped reshape the nation. The word, United States of America, forms a bold semicircle, proclaiming identity. E pluribus unum, meaning, out of many one, whispers a reminder of unity. And the denomination, 1 cent, grounds the coin in its practical function, a unit of commerce, a humble piece of exchange. The coin is both symbol and tool, both art and money. Now imagine the life of one single 1994 D penny. It was struck in Denver, released into circulation, passed from hand to hand. Maybe it bought a piece of candy in 1995, or rolled across a counter at a gas station in 1997, or sat forgotten in a piggy bank through the early 2000s. Maybe it survived decades in circulation, worn down but still legible, edges softened by time, details fading but never fully erased. Or maybe it was pulled from circulation early, tucked into a roll, set aside by someone who just liked the shine of it, and today it sits in near mint condition, a tiny time traveler from 3 decades ago. Multiply that by millions and you get the vast story of American commerce, small exchanges echoing across years, each coin a participant in countless human interactions. Collectors who dream of the $653 million penny often search with magnifying glasses, microscopes, reference guides in hand, scrolling through endless online forums. They debate whether a die crack here or a slight doubling there could mean the difference between pocket change and treasure. Auctions highlight certain rare error coins, feeding the hope that one day someone might stumble across the ultimate find. In truth, the market sets values based on rarity, demand, and condition, and the market is grounded in reality, not fantasy. But the fantasy persists, and in many ways it enriches the experience. Because even if the 1994 D penny is not going to sell for hundreds of millions, the search for such a coin sparks curiosity, education, and a deeper appreciation for history. And so we circle back to the heart of the matter. The 1994 D Lincoln cent, a coin of 2.5 grams, 19 millimeters across, copper-plated zinc, bearing the image of Abraham Lincoln and the Denver Mint's D. Minted by the hundreds of millions, circulating across America and beyond. Common, yes. Ordinary, yes. But also extraordinary, because it represents the blending of history, art, economics, myth, and human imagination. It is worth 1 cent, or a few cents more, or maybe in rare error cases much more, but in the imagination it can be priceless, even mythically worth 653 million. That, in the end, is the beauty of coin collecting and the fascination of the penny. It proves that even the smallest things can carry the biggest stories. If the first part of our journey with the 1994 D penny introduces us to the coin as a physical object and as a symbol of history, then the next chapter invites us to look at its lineage, the decades of tradition that gave rise to it, and the human fascination that elevates it. When the Lincoln cent was first introduced in 1909, it marked a radical shift in American coinage. Until then, the United States Mint avoided putting real historical figures on coins, preferring allegorical symbols like Lady Liberty, eagles, wreaths, and shields. But 1909 was the centennial of Abraham Lincoln's birth, and President Theodore Roosevelt, inspired by the power of coinage as national art, approved Victor David Brenner's portrait. The public embraced it instantly. Here was the beloved president immortalized on the smallest denomination, accessible to everyone, rich or poor. Over time, the Lincoln cent became the most familiar coin in America, minted in staggering numbers, circulating in every pocket, purse, and drawer, a democratic piece of art carried by millions. By 1994, that legacy was well established. Generations had grown up with Lincoln's profile as a constant companion. Collectors could look at the long series of pennies and trace not only Lincoln's enduring place in American memory, but also the evolving history of minting itself. Early wheat cents from 1909 through 1958 bore a reverse design with 2 wheat stalks framing the words 1 cent. Simple yet elegant, and those wheat pennies became nostalgic keepsakes for anyone old enough to remember them. In 1959, the design shifted to the Lincoln Memorial, tying the coin directly to Washington, D.C.'s architectural homage. By the 1980s, the metal composition shifted from mostly copper to mostly zinc, marking another major change. All of these transitions left their fingerprints on the 1994 D penny, because every coin is part of a series, and every series evolves with time. When you study coins in detail, you notice patterns of rarity and value. Not all coins are created equal, even if billions were struck. Certain years are famous for rare varieties. The 1909 SVDB cent with Brenner's initials boldly on the reverse. The 1914 D Lincoln cent scarce because of its low mintage. The 1955 doubled die cent with its spectacular doubled lettering. Each of these coins went from ordinary to legendary because of circumstances, low mintages, or minting mistakes. That's why collectors scan their 1994 D pennies with such determination, hoping to find an error or anomaly that will elevate it to that pantheon of great rarities. In fact, 1994 did produce some varieties and errors that still intrigue specialists. There are examples of double die obverse coins where the motto, "In God We Trust," shows noticeable doubling, or where the date has a shadowed echo. There are also off-center strikes where Lincoln's portrait is skewed to one side and part of the design is missing, the blank planchet exposed. And there are clipped planchet errors where a portion of the coin is missing entirely due to the way the blank was cut from the sheet of metal. These coins, when preserved, can fetch significant sums at auction, sometimes a few $100s, sometimes more if the era is dramatic and the condition high. Still, the mystique of $653 million attached to a penny is less about hard numismatic reality and more about the collective imagination. People want to believe in miracle finds, and so myths grow around coins like ivy around stone. Some of these myths are fueled by misunderstanding. An article or post might highlight that a certain rare penny once sold for tens of thousands, and soon someone misquotes it, rounds up the numbers, exaggerates the rarity, until the story snowballs into impossible figures. The internet then amplifies it, and suddenly ordinary people are turning their pockets inside out, staring at their pennies, wondering if they might hold untold riches. That kind of mass hope is almost like a modern gold rush, not for nuggets and riverbeds but for tiny copper-plated zinc discs hiding in everyday life. But the more you explore the history, the more fascinating it becomes even without the tall tales. Consider the Denver Mint itself, where the 1994 D pennies were struck. The Denver Mint began producing coins in the early 1900s, and over the decades it developed into one of the largest and most efficient coin production facilities in the world. The D Mint mark represents not just a location but a legacy of precision, industrial power, and continuity. The Denver Mint has produced coins through wars, depressions, booms, and recessions, its machines striking relentlessly, billions of coins each year pouring into the economy. Each coin with a D carries that heritage, a tiny ambassador from Colorado traveling across the nation and beyond. And then there's the psychology of collecting. Why do people chase pennies at all? Because collecting is about more than monetary value. It is about the thrill of the hunt, the joy of discovery, the satisfaction of holding history in your hand. A collector who finds a pristine 1994 D penny in mint condition tucked inside an old roll feels a spark of triumph even if it's only worth a few dollars. The human brain craves pattern recognition, rarity, completion. That's why coin albums with little slots to fill are so addictive. Every empty slot is a puzzle piece waiting to be found. When a collector places a 1994 D penny into its rightful space, they are not just filling a hole, they are completing part of a narrative, a chapter of a larger story. The idea that a humble coin could be worth hundreds of millions, even if fantastical, taps into another deep human instinct, the longing for transformation. We dream that something small and overlooked could turn out to be life-changing, that fortune could be hidden in plain sight. It is the same dream behind lottery tickets, behind buried treasure stories, behind alchemy and fairy tales. The penny becomes a metaphor for the hope that within the ordinary lies the extraordinary. And though the actual market value may not align with the myth, the emotional power of the story is undeniable. To appreciate the 1994 D penny more deeply, let us also reflect on its physical presence. Hold one in your hand. It feels light but solid, a soft gleam of copper coating that will darken with time, developing spots, toning, sometimes turning almost black after years in circulation. The ridges along the edge are absent. Pennies are smooth-edged, unlike dimes and quarters, so the coin's perimeter feels gentle under your fingertips. The relief of Lincoln's profile catches the light, highlights on his cheekbone, shadows under his chin. The date 1994 anchors it in time, and the D mint mark makes it specific. Every scratch and nick tells part of its journey. If it is well worn, it has lived a busy life, passing through thousands of hands, part of countless tiny transactions. If it is uncirculated, its fields remain reflective, its luster radiating like the day it left the press, a survivor that somehow avoided the chaos of circulation. Numismatists sometimes describe coins as miniature works of sculpture, and that is exactly what the 1994 D penny is. Victor David Brenner's portrait may be small, but it is art, designed to convey dignity, humanity, and strength within a tiny circle of metal. The Lincoln Memorial on the reverse, though simplified, echoes the grandeur of neoclassical architecture, its symmetry and balance suggesting order and permanence. Imagine the engravers working at the U.S. Mint, scaling down grand ideas into designs that fit in less than an inch of space. Imagine the dies cut with precision, the presses striking thousands of coins per minute, each piece a faithful reproduction of the design. It is easy to take for granted, but the technology and artistry behind a single penny is immense. By 1994, the Lincoln cent had been minted for 85 years, making it one of the longest-running coin designs in U.S. history. That longevity itself creates value of a different kind. People who collect Lincoln cents are not just collecting metal, they are collecting a story that stretches across generations, across changing artistic styles, across technological shifts. The 1994 penny is one tile in a vast mosaic, a small but essential part of the whole. And in its ordinariness lies its magic. It is both everywhere and unique, both humble and historic. So when we hear the claim that a 1994 penny is worth $653 million, we can smile. Not because we believe the number literally, but because we understand the human hunger behind it. We can enjoy the fantasy while also appreciating the real. The real story of the 1994 penny is about history, design, industry, and human imagination. The real value lies in knowledge, in appreciation, in the stories we tell ourselves. And maybe, just maybe, in rare cases, the real value lies in a mint error that transforms the ordinary into something genuinely rare and collectible. That tension between myth and reality is what keeps the hobby alive, what keeps collectors searching, what keeps people fascinated by coins as small as a penny. When we shift from the story of design and history into the marketplace, the 1994 penny enters a different arena altogether, one where value is not dictated by the government but by collectors, dealers, and the complex web of demand and rarity. For most pennies struck in 1994, their destiny was to serve as currency, to clink into cash registers, to help make exact change, to pile into jars and eventually be turned back into banks. But a small fraction of those coins took another path. They entered the world of collectors, a world where details invisible to the casual eye determine whether a coin is worth a cent, $1, 100, or sometimes thousands. The line between pocket change and prized possession is drawn by condition, by rarity, and by quirks of minting. In the coin market, condition is everything. Grading systems exist to standardize the evaluation of a coin's surface, its luster, its strike, and its preservation. A 1994 penny fresh from the mint, with no scratches, no wear, no dulling of its surface, can be called mint state, abbreviated MS. Within that mint state are grades from 60 up to the nearly perfect 70. A penny graded MS 65 might shimmer with bright copper luster, every detail of Lincoln's beard sharp and crisp, the fields reflecting light cleanly. Collectors prize such coins, especially when they come from rolls or mint sets preserved since the year of issue. Prices climb accordingly. While a circulated 1994 is worth face value, an MS 67 example can fetch much more, sometimes even hundreds of dollars because of the rarity of such perfection among coins struck by the millions. But beyond condition, the real spice of the market comes from errors and varieties. These are the coins that slip through the cracks of the minting process, carrying quirks that set them apart. The 1994 cent has several such possibilities. Double die obverse are among the most famous types of errors, where the design was impressed into the die twice at slightly different angles. When such a die strikes planchets, the resulting coins show doubled lettering or numbers, making the date or the motto appear shadowed. Collectors find this thrilling because the doubling is visible to the naked eye and unmistakably different. Another error, the off-center strike, happens when the blank planchet is not seated correctly in the press, and the design lands off to the side, leaving a blank crescent. The more off-center the strike, the more valuable the coin, especially if the date and mint mark remain visible. Then there are die cracks, little raised lines caused by fractures in the die itself, and clipped planchets, where a piece of the blank is missing, leaving a curved edge. Each of these transforms an ordinary penny into something sought after, sometimes worth $20, sometimes $100, sometimes even more depending on rarity and demand. This is where auction houses step into the spotlight. Heritage auctions, Stack's Bowers, and other major numismatic auctioneers frequently list error coins, and their sales become reference points for collectors. A dramatic off-center 1994 penny in high grade might sell for a few $100s at auction, far beyond its humble face value. A double die might bring even more if the variety is distinct and well documented. When headlines report these sales, the numbers excite the imagination. A penny worth a few hundred may not change your life, but it feels miraculous when compared to its intended value of just 1 cent. From there, it is a short leap for stories to exaggerate the numbers, multiplying a few hundred into a few thousand, then into millions, until eventually the internet begins whispering about pennies worth hundreds of millions. The truth gets bent with every retelling, and the myth grows. Consider how stories spread in the digital age. A photograph of a shiny penny appears with a caption: "Check your pocket change. This penny could be worth $653 million. The post spreads because people are curious, hopeful, enchanted by the possibility. Most never question whether such a number could be realistic. They simply glance at their own coins, hearts racing with the idea of hidden wealth. This is the new folklore, coin collecting blended with viral culture. In the old days, coin values spread through printed price guides, whispered conversations at coin shows, and hobby magazines. Now, social media blasts numbers into the stratosphere, blending fact with fiction. The 1994 D penny became one of those viral subjects, not because it is objectively the rarest or most valuable, but because it was ordinary enough that everyone had one and extraordinary enough that people could imagine a miracle hidden inside. Of course, seasoned numismatists shake their heads at the $653 million claim. They know that the highest prices ever paid for coins in the entire history of numismatics hover in the tens of millions, not hundreds. The legendary 1933 Double Eagle, a $20 gold coin, sold for over $18 million at auction in 2021, setting records. The 1794 flowing hair silver dollar, believed by some to be the first silver dollar struck by the U.S. Mint, sold for over $10 million. Those are the realms of genuine rarity and historical significance. No penny, not even the famous 1943 copper cent or the 1955 double die, has approached those figures. The idea that a modern 1994 D penny could leapfrog them all and reach 600 million is pure fantasy. Yet, in a way, it is a testament to the power of imagination. People want to believe that anything is possible, that even the humblest coin might surpass the grandest treasures. Still, real money does flow in the market for 1994 D pennies, just on a more modest scale. A set of pristine coins might sell for $20 to $50. Certain dramatic errors might push into the hundreds. And even if the sums are not astronomical, they still matter to collectors. The joy of selling a penny for $100 is not just in the cash, it is in the validation that you found something rare, that you spotted a detail others overlooked, that you connected with history in a tangible way. The 1994 D penny becomes a bridge between the everyday and the extraordinary, not through $600 million fantasies but through the steady, rewarding pursuit of collecting. This is what makes coins so compelling. They are both commodities and artifacts, both tools of exchange and objects of fascination. When you hold a 1994 D penny, you can think of it as pocket change or as a tiny lottery ticket, or as a work of art, or as a historical document. Each perspective is valid, each lens reveals something different. That multiplicity of meaning is why coin collecting has endured for centuries. People collected ancient Roman coins, medieval coins, colonial coins, not because they were worth millions but because they connected them to a bigger story. The Lincoln cent, and the 1994 D specifically, carries that same energy into the modern age. And let us not forget that every coin has traveled. Imagine a single 1994 D penny minted in Denver, shipped across the country, circulated in California, used in New York, lost in Texas, found again in Illinois. Imagine how many hands it has touched, how many small exchanges it has been part of. That penny might have helped buy a cup of coffee, a newspaper, a child's toy, a bus ticket. It might have sat in the bottom of a washing machine, tumbled through years of laundry, only to resurface later. Each scratch and ding is a record of that journey, a map of human life etched into metal. And when a collector finally plucks it from circulation and places it under a magnifying glass, suddenly all of that history is noticed, preserved, and valued. So when we hear those giant numbers, $653 million, We can see them not as literal truth but as symbolic truth. They symbolize the infinite value people place on hope, on imagination, on the idea that miracles are hiding in plain sight. The 1994 penny doesn't need to be worth a fortune to be fascinating. It already is fascinating because it embodies so many layers: art, history, commerce, myth, and the eternal human search for meaning. Coin collecting has never been just about the coins themselves, it has always been about people, about the communities that form around the hunt, about the families that pass albums down through generations, about the stories told at kitchen tables when someone dumps out a jar of change and begins sifting through it with wide-eyed excitement. The 1994 penny, though modern and common, is part of that culture, and to understand its place, we need to step inside the world of collectors themselves. Imagine a child in the mid-1990s sitting with a grandparent, a magnifying glass in one hand, a Whitman blue coin album in the other. They're looking for dates, filling little circular holes, delighting when they find a missing piece. The grandparent explains what the tiny D means beneath the date, how it marks Denver as the mint of origin, how pennies can come from Philadelphia, San Francisco, or Denver, and how each mint has its own story. The child listens, enthralled, suddenly realizing that these little coins carry hidden codes, little secrets that transform pocket change into treasure maps. The 1994 penny slips into one of those slots, perhaps gleaming in red, perhaps worn in brown, but always significant because it completes a row, it tells a story, it brings the collection one step closer to wholeness. Fast forward a generation and that same child, now grown, remembers those evenings and feels a surge of nostalgia every time they see a penny from the 1990s. They may even pass the hobby along to their own children, who in turn stare at pennies under better magnifiers, digital microscopes perhaps, scouring for doubled dies or unusual marks. The 1994 penny, common though it is, becomes a symbol of continuity, of family tradition, of memory carried forward in copper and zinc, and then there are the communities beyond family. Coin clubs meet in school auditoriums, church halls, libraries. Collectors lay out their finds, trade duplicates, argue good-naturedly about grades and varieties. The 1994 penny sometimes shows up in such conversations as a starting point, a coin everyone has seen, a coin everyone owns, a coin that can be used to teach new members about grading scales, mint marks, or spotting errors. Online, entire forums are dedicated to coins, and posts about the 1994 appear with photos attached, someone asking whether the faint doubling they see is valuable, whether the discoloration is unusual, whether the internet rumors about million-dollar value are true. Seasoned collectors chime in, some patient, some sarcastic, all part of the eternal back-and-forth that makes hobbies come alive. What's remarkable is how such a small coin becomes a touchstone for culture. Think of how many movies and stories have used pennies as symbols. A lucky penny picked up on the sidewalk. A penny tossed into a fountain with a wish. The phrase, "A penny for your thoughts." Pennies carry emotional weight disproportionate to their face value, and when a 1994 penny enters that symbolic current, it too becomes more than money. Someone might keep one as a lucky charm, maybe because it was found on the day of a wedding or a graduation, or because it came as change during a moment that mattered. Collectors know that sentimental value often outstrips monetary value, and yet both values intertwine in fascinating ways. Within pop culture, pennies have always been underdogs. They're the smallest unit of currency, often disregarded, sometimes even debated in Congress as candidates for elimination. Yet because of that, they are beloved by collectors. They represent resilience, persistence, and humble dignity. Abraham Lincoln's face on the smallest coin speaks volumes. He is remembered not through gold or silver, but through copper, the coin that circulates the widest, the one that everyone encounters. In that light, the 1994 penny represents not just the economics of the mid-1990s but also the philosophy of accessibility, of history reaching everyone's hands, not just the wealthy. There is also something inherently adventurous about searching pennies. Entire books have been written about coin roll hunting, where collectors go to banks, obtain rolls or even boxes of pennies, and sift through them looking for rarities. Hours are spent unwrapping, checking dates, scrutinizing mint marks, and setting aside interesting finds. A 1994 D might slip by dozens of times in a single hunt, but each one is examined nonetheless, because you never know if that particular piece might carry a doubled die, a dramatic error, or simply a sharp strike worth saving. Collectors often film themselves during these hunts, posting videos online where thousands of viewers watch them unwrap roll after roll, the suspense building with every reveal. The thrill of finding a wheat penny or a shiny mint state coin lights up the screen, and in those moments, the 1994 D penny, though modern, is part of the adventure. It's not just about the individual coins either. Entire sets of Lincoln cents are pursued with passion. Some collectors aim to gather every date and mint mark from 1909 to the present. The 1994 D is one of those necessary pieces, a stepping stone on the way to completion. It may not be the star, like the 1909 SVDB or the 1955 double die, but it is part of the chorus, without which the song is incomplete. Every coin in a set has its role to play, and the 1994 D plays the role of the everyday soldier, the coin that fills the gap, the coin that represents the continuity of the series through the end of the 20th century. And sometimes, the ordinary coins become extraordinary not because of their physical qualities but because of the stories attached to them. Perhaps a soldier carried a 1994 D penny overseas, keeping it as a token of home. Perhaps a parent saved one from the birth year of their child, holding it in a drawer as a keepsake. Perhaps someone scratched their initials into one, turning it into a makeshift love token. Each story gives the coin new dimensions. To a collector, these stories are as important as mint marks and grades. They are the invisible patina that clings to every piece of metal currency. Even beyond collectors, there are casual observers who find delight in pennies. Teachers use them to illustrate math concepts, magicians use them in tricks, artists use them in mosaics or sculptures. A 1994 D penny glued into an art piece is not just 1 cent, it is 1 unit of creativity. Pennies have been used to tile floors, to build massive murals, to cover entire walls, each coin contributing its color and sheen to a larger design. In those settings, the date matters less, but for someone who spots 1994 D among the sea of pennies, there is a thrill of recognition, a reminder that even art is built from the most ordinary of materials. And then there is the great paradox, a coin that is almost valueless in the economy but priceless in memory. A penny costs more to produce than its face value, a fact economists often point out, yet it costs nothing to dream with. When someone hears that a 1994 D penny could be worth $653 million, the number itself may be impossible, but the dream it sparks is worth far more than 1 cent. People stop and look. People imagine. People wonder if the coins in their pockets might change their lives. That act of wondering, that pause, that spark of curiosity, is where the true magic lives. So the 1994 D penny continues to roll along in life, sometimes ignored, sometimes treasured, sometimes mythologized. It is part of coin albums, part of change jars, part of wish fountains, part of art projects, part of viral legends, part of auctions, part of family traditions. It is everywhere and it is overlooked, and yet it is always there, waiting to be noticed again. The story of this single year, this single mint mark, is both utterly specific and universally human. If you hold the 1994 D penny in your hand and then glance at the coins of other nations, you start to see something universal. Every culture has its humble unit, its smallest coin, often dismissed, often dropped on sidewalks and left behind. In Canada it was the 1 cent coin with Queen Elizabeth II's portrait and a maple leaf reverse, now discontinued. In the United Kingdom it is the penny with the crown portcullis, part of the long line of British coinage going back centuries. In Japan, the 1 yen coin, made of lightweight aluminum, feels like holding almost nothing at all, yet carries the same aura of simplicity and accessibility. Each of these coins, like the American penny, tells a story of how nations imagine value at the most basic level. And just as Americans dream about rare pennies being worth millions, so too do collectors in other countries whisper about era coins, low mintage years, and miracle finds. The psychology of tiny denominations is curious. These are coins people overlook, coins they shove into jars or sweep into donation bins, coins children play with in pretend games. They're seen as disposable, yet precisely because of that, they can become magical. When something regarded as almost worthless turns out to be precious, the surprise is multiplied. That is why stories of rare pennies explode across social media, because the idea of the smallest coin carrying the greatest fortune feels poetic, like a fable come to life. A penny, a cent, a coin you wouldn't bend to pick up on the street, suddenly elevated to worth more than gold, is a reversal of expectation that speaks directly to the human love of irony and wonder. Other countries have their own legendary coins. In Canada, the 1936 cent, struck in tiny numbers with a dot under the date, is one of the rarest Canadian coins, worth tens of thousands today. In the UK, error coins from decimal transitions or misstrikes sometimes fetch surprising prices. In Australia, the 2000 Neil $1 coin, struck with the wrong obverse die, sells for hundreds or even thousands of dollars. Each of these stories mirrors the American fascination with the 1994 penny, reminding us that the dream of hidden treasure and small change is not uniquely American but deeply human. The marketplace reflects this universality. International coin shows buzz with the same excitement you find at a local American coin club. Collectors crowd around cases of gleaming proof sets, trays of ancient Roman bronzes, piles of bulk world coins sold by the pound. Somewhere among them, a tray of Lincoln cents might be offered, with 1994 specimens glinting in the light, their red copper plating catching the eyes of passers-by. A collector from Europe might pick one up not for rarity but for curiosity, a token of American culture. To them, the 1994 penny is exotic, a foreign artifact, a symbol of another land's money. The story of its supposed multi-million-dollar value may even have reached them online, so they smile, recognizing that even myths travel globally. This global echo also highlights another layer: the fate of low-value coins in modern economies. Many countries have phased them out. Canada stopped producing pennies in 2012. Australia phased out 1 and 2 cent coins in the 1990s. New Zealand eliminated its low denominations as well. The United States continues to strike billions of pennies each year, even though debates rage about whether they should be retired. And yet, while economists argue about costs and efficiency, collectors quietly rejoice, because the penny remains a playground for the imagination. Without the penny, there would be number 1943 steel cent stories, no wheat cent hunts, no modern myths like the 1994 penny worth $653 million. Ending the penny might make financial sense, but it would rob future generations of a cultural touchstone. In that sense, the 1994 penny is part of a larger philosophical conversation. What is value? Is value only what the market says, or is value also the meaning people attach? A coin worth 1 cent might cost more than 1 cent to produce. Its melt value might be negligible. Its collector value might be a few dollars at best unless it carries a dramatic error. And yet its imaginative value, the stories it sparks, the myths it carries, the dreams it inspires, may be beyond calculation. That's why numbers like $653 million arise, because people are trying, in some strange way, to assign a numerical form to that limitless imaginative value. And when you listen closely, you hear the same thing in other countries. In India, villagers sometimes talk about certain old rupee coins being lucky, worth far more than their face value. In China, stories circulate about rare Fin and Yuan coins commanding fortunes. In South America, small centavo coins sometimes become legends because of unusual years or minting quirks. Each culture finds meaning in its smallest coins, each attaches hope, myth, and imagination to them. The 1994 penny is simply America's chapter in that global book of coin folklore. The 1994 penny also lives in a curious cultural moment, the mid-1990s. Think about it. The Cold War had ended only a few years earlier. The internet was just beginning to spread into homes. Pop culture was dominated by television shows, cassette tapes, grunge bands, early video games. The economy was stable, technology was accelerating, optimism was in the air. The coins minted in 1994 silently absorb that context. When you look at one now, you are looking at a relic of that moment in history, even if it feels recent. For young collectors today, 1994 is as distant as 1950 might have felt to their grandparents. The penny is a time machine, a way of touching the past. And so, the myth of incredible value only adds another layer. It's not only a coin, it's not only a memory, it's not only a work of art, it is also a legend, a story whispered across social media, a headline that makes people pause. The number 653 million is outrageous, yes, but it lingers in the mind because it connects the ordinary to the extraordinary. That connection is not confined by borders. Just as pennies carry meaning across the United States, so too do their stories ripple outward, inspiring people everywhere to look again at their own coins, to wonder if treasure might be hiding in plain sight, to dream that something small can change everything. When you hold a 1994 D penny and really look at it, not as pocket change but as an artifact of design, you begin to see the artistry that most people overlook. The obverse shows Abraham Lincoln in profile, facing right, a design that first appeared in 1909 to mark the centennial of his birth. Victor David Brenner, the sculptor chosen for the task, gave the coin more than just a likeness. He gave it presence. Lincoln's gaze is calm, steady, almost solemn, his hair carefully detailed, his suit collar crisply defined. Even after decades of redesigns in American coinage, Brenner's portrait remains one of the most recognizable and respected, a quiet icon pressed into billions of tiny canvases. By 1994, this portrait had already been in circulation for 85 years, unchanged in its essentials, a living testament to the power of simple design. The lettering frames the portrait with deliberate clarity. The words "I in God we trust" arc above, Liberty sits to the left, and the date 1994 to the right, with a tiny D mint mark below, telling you that this particular coin was struck in Denver. Nothing about this arrangement is accidental. The motto reflects national ideals, liberty anchors the theme of freedom, and the date and mint mark ground the coin in time and place. Together, they form a balance of word and image that has become so familiar it feels invisible, yet that invisibility is the mark of great design. Turn the coin over, and the reverse in 1994 still bore the image of the Lincoln Memorial, a design introduced in 1959 to replace the earlier wheat ears motif. Frank Gasparo created this reverse, placing the neoclassical temple on a small copper stage. If you look closely with magnification, you can even see the tiny seated figure of Lincoln inside, echoing the larger statue in the actual memorial in Washington, D.C. This detail connects the obverse and reverse in a clever circle of symbolism. Lincoln's face on one side, Lincoln's monument on the other, the man and his memory bound together in copper and zinc. For a coin as small as a penny, the artistry is astonishing. Designers had to work with tiny spaces, shallow relief, and the constraints of mass production, yet they managed to create enduring symbols. The 1994 D penny, though mass-produced by the billions, still carries that artistry in every detail. The lines of the memorial are sharp when the coin is new, the columns evenly spaced, the steps clearly defined. Over time, circulation softens these details, but the design's essence remains. Even worn pennies carry echoes of that original vision. Why does this matter? Because coins are not only tools of commerce, they are miniature works of public art. They circulate widely, reaching hands that may never visit a museum, carrying portraits and symbols into daily life. The penny puts Lincoln's face into every pocket, every drawer, every child's piggy bank. In 1994, that meant more than just honoring a president. It meant reminding millions of citizens of Lincoln's legacy, his words, his role in holding the Union together. Every transaction with a penny became, in a subtle way, an interaction with history. Design also shapes emotion. A coin with a beautiful, balanced design is more likely to be remembered, saved, and cherished. The Lincoln cent achieves this through its iconic profile and its monumental reverse. Compare it to coins of other nations, and you see how distinctive it is. Many countries use coats of arms, animals, plants, or abstract symbols. The U.S. chose a man, a story, a legacy. By doing so, It tied its lowest denomination to its highest ideals. That's why the penny has resisted elimination, not because it makes economic sense, but because it feels like a vessel of memory. The design also evolves subtly over time, adding layers of meaning. In 2009, for example, four special reverses were issued to celebrate the bicentennial of Lincoln's birth, showing scenes from his life. But in 1994, the memorial reverse still reigned, linking the coin to decades of circulation and countless memories. People alive in 1994 had used pennies with wheat reverses in their youth, had watched the transition in 1959, and now carried coins that bore both continuity and change. For young people then, the memorial reverse was simply the penny they grew up with. For older people, it was already part of a longer story. The coin became a bridge between generations, a thread of design tying together past and present. The artistry of the penny also lies in its symbolism as a whole. The coppery color itself is a kind of symbol. Even though since 1982 pennies have been mostly zinc with copper plating, the look remains copper, evoking a sense of tradition and endurance. The word cent on the reverse, flanked by United States of America and 1, gives the coin its identity, the smallest unit, yet proudly labeled, part of something larger. Coins remind us that money is not only numbers but objects that carry identity, art, and national pride. When you consider all this, the 1994 penny stops being just a cent. It becomes a canvas of design choices, a palette of meaning, a token of history. And because art and meaning are not easily measured in dollars, the myths of incredible value find fertile soil. People look at the coin and see beauty, see history, see Lincoln's steady gaze, and then the leap to imagining it worth hundreds of millions does not feel entirely absurd. The design makes the coin feel larger than life, more than 1 cent, more than commerce. That feeling is what collectors and dreamers respond to. So when someone on YouTube or TikTok says the 1994 penny could be worth $653 million, they are tapping into more than gullibility. They are tapping into the deep design of the coin itself, the artistry that makes it seem significant, the symbolism that makes it seem priceless. The claim is false, but the feeling behind it is true. This tiny coin does carry more than numbers. It carries memory, art, and meaning. That, in its way, is priceless. A coin is never just metal. It is always a companion to human life. Think about the 1994 penny and how many stories it has slipped into without anyone noticing. It has been given as change at gas stations, clinked into tip jars at diners, pressed into the hands of children at grocery counters, lost between couch cushions, forgotten in the bottoms of washing machines. Each time it changes hands, it becomes part of someone's story, whether grand or ordinary. For some, it is just another coin. For others, it is a keepsake, a memory, or even a spark of imagination. Consider the collector who began as a child, emptying pockets on the kitchen table, sorting pennies by date. That child may have found a shiny 1994 straight from circulation, marveled at its luster, slipped it into a cardboard holder with pride. Years later, that same penny, now toned and less brilliant, might still sit in the collector's album, a reminder not just of the coin but of childhood wonder. Collectors often describe their first finds with emotion, and those finds often involve common dates like 1994. The coin becomes valuable not in dollars, but in memory. Families, too, create stories around coins. A grandfather may have saved jars of pennies over decades, tossing in every spare cent he found. After he passes, the family gathers, opening those jars, pouring out rivers of copper-colored circles. Among them, dozens of 1994 pennies sparkle back. They are common, yes, but they are also part of the grandfather's life, coins he touched, coins that traveled through his days. Suddenly, the family sees them differently. They are not just cents, they are heirlooms, tokens of continuity. A single 1994 from that jar may be saved in a drawer forever, its monetary value irrelevant, its emotional value immeasurable. Then there are stories of discovery, when ordinary people stumble onto coins and wonder if they have found treasure. A man cleaning out his attic finds a roll of 1994 pennies, untouched, their red surfaces gleaming as if freshly struck. He turns to the internet, finds claims of unimaginable values, and for a moment his heart leaps. Could this be the miracle? Could these pennies pay off the mortgage? Even when the truth emerges, that they are worth cents, not millions, the experience itself is unforgettable. For a time, he dreamed. For a time, he believed fortune was in his hands. That dream, however brief, changes how he looks at every coin thereafter. Children, especially, give penny stories. A child drops a 1994D into a wishing fountain at the mall, watching it sink through the water, making a silent wish. Another child keeps one in a pocket as a lucky coin, rubbing it before tests or games. Still another tapes one to a school project about Abraham Lincoln, seeing in it not just money but history. In these moments, pennies transform into talismans, tiny anchors of hope and imagination. A 1994D can be priceless if it carries a wish, a fear, a memory. Even myths like the $653 million claim generate human stories. A grandmother hears the rumor, checks her change, calls her grandson with excitement. "Look, I have a 1994D. Could it be worth something?" They sit together, magnifying glass in hand, searching for signs of rarity. They laugh, they speculate, they bond over the possibility. Even when they learn the myth is false, the shared experience remains real. That penny, whether worth 1 cent or 1 million, becomes the coin they examine together one afternoon, the coin that sparked conversation, the coin that will forever remind them of their laughter. Collectors often talk about the thrill of the hunt. For them, the 1994D may not be a key date, but it is part of the larger mosaic. Building a complete set of Lincoln cents from 1909 to the present requires it. Without 1994D, the set is incomplete. So when a collector finally fills that little slot in the album, the coin gains a new meaning. It is not rare, but it completes the puzzle. Completion brings satisfaction, and satisfaction gives the coin its personal worth. There are also darker stories. Coins can be hoarded obsessively, tied to memories of scarcity or loss. Someone who lived through hard times may save every penny, unwilling to let any slip away. A 1994D in that hoard is part of a silent testimony to resilience, a reminder of years when every cent mattered. To outsiders, the pile looks trivial. To the saver, it is security, control, a small shield against uncertainty. The coin is both ordinary and deeply charged with emotion, and then there are the stories of pure chance. A penny dropped on the street, found by a passerby, picked up with the old saying, "Find a penny, pick it up, all day long you'll have good luck." That 1994D, lying face up on the sidewalk, suddenly feels like a sign, a token from the universe. Maybe it changes someone's mood. Maybe it turns a bad day into a hopeful one. No auction catalog can measure that kind of value, but it is value nonetheless. This is why the legend of pennies persists. Because they are small enough to slip into everyday lives unnoticed, yet important enough to carry stories once noticed. A coin is both trivial and profound. The 1994D, mass-produced and common, still weaves into countless personal narratives. Every scratch on its surface is a mark of travel, every touch adds to its invisible biography. You could never track all the lives it has passed through, yet you know they are there, written silently into its worn copper skin. So when myths claim it is worth hundreds of millions, they are amplifying something that is already true in another sense. The penny carries stories worth more than money. Whether it sits in a collector's album, a family jar, a child's pocket, or a stranger's palm, the 1994D penny is alive with human meaning. That is why it endures. If you zoom out from the pocket that carries a 1994D penny and look at the wider world, you begin to see how unusual the American relationship with the cent really is. Many countries have long since abandoned their smallest denominations. Canada, for example, stopped minting its penny in 2012, deciding that the cost of production outweighed the usefulness. Canadians rounded transactions to the nearest 5 cents, and life carried on without much disruption. Australia had done the same decades earlier, removing its 1 and 2 cent coins in 1992. New Zealand followed a similar path. Across Europe, when nations adopted the euro, many found their smallest coins, 1 and 2 cent pieces, unpopular and rarely used. Some stores quietly round to the nearest 5 cents, and people drop the tiny coins into jars, letting them pile up unused. Yet in the United States, the penny endures. The 1994 D penny, like every other cent minted in the modern era, reflects not only economics but culture. Americans resist letting go of it. Why? Partly it is tradition. The Lincoln cent has been a fixture for more than a century, longer than any other U.S. coin design. People feel attached to it, as if eliminating it would erase part of national identity. The face of Lincoln on the cent is not just a portrait, it is a symbol of unity, emancipation, sacrifice. Taking that image out of circulation would feel like diminishing his presence in everyday life. There is also sentimentality around the very idea of the penny. Sayings like, "A penny saved is a penny earned," or "A penny for your thoughts," have woven the coin into language and culture. Children learn to count with pennies, fill piggy banks with them, toss them into fountains. To end a penny would be to end those rituals. Even if a 1994 D is only worth 1 cent, it carries with it echoes of all those idioms, all those cultural habits. Economically, arguments rage back and forth. It costs more than a cent to produce a penny, critics say, making it irrational. Yet supporters argue that rounding would inconvenience people, that charities rely on penny donations, that removing the coin would symbolize inflationary decline. Beneath the debates, though, lies something more emotional, a reluctance to part with a small symbol that feels larger than it is. That's why myths of extraordinary value thrive in America more than elsewhere. In countries that have retired their lowest coins, nobody believes that a modern 1 cent piece could be worth hundreds of millions. Those coins are remembered as nuisances, not treasures. But in the US, the penny is still alive, still in circulation, still part of cultural imagination. So when someone claims a 1994 D penny could be worth $653 million, it strikes a peculiar chord. People know it sounds impossible, yet they half hope it could be true, because the penny itself has been wrapped in myth for so long. Comparing across nations also reveals the power of design. Canadian pennies, when retired, were mostly remembered as maple leaf tokens, simple and national but not iconic. Australian and New Zealand small coins had animals, charming but easily left behind. The US penny, by contrast, carries Lincoln's face, the Lincoln Memorial, and by extension, the entire story of the Civil War, emancipation, and national unity. That depth of symbolism makes it harder to discard. A 1994 D penny may be one among billions, but collectively these pennies feel like an unbroken chain of memory stretching back to 1909. This persistence also fuels collecting. When other nations retired their smallest coins, collectors scrambled to hoard a few as souvenirs, then moved on. In the US, because the penny continues, there is a living culture of cent collecting. Every year adds new entries, every year keeps the hunt alive. The 1994 D may not be a rare year, but it holds its place in that continuum, filling albums, completing sets, anchoring the larger story. The global context also sharpens the irony. In Canada, you can no longer use a penny in everyday transactions. In Australia and New Zealand, the youngest generations barely remember them. But in the US, pennies still jingle in pockets, pile in jars, and get handed out by the billions. That means that a 1994 D penny is both incredibly common and strangely enduring. It is a survivor in a world that has largely let go of such coins. Its value is not $653 million in dollars, but it is priceless as a symbol of persistence. So when you compare the penny globally, you see how peculiar it is. It survives not because of economic logic, but because of memory, tradition, and identity. And in that survival, every penny, including the humble 1994 D, gains a kind of quiet power. Other nations melted theirs down, rounded theirs away. America kept them, polished them, mythologized them. And that, in a sense, makes each penny worth far more than its face value, at least in the realm of imagination. When you stand back and look at the 1994 D penny, the first impression is that of ordinariness. Billions were minted. They sit unnoticed in cash drawers, laundromat machines, and forgotten jars. Yet, the longer you think about it, the more you realize the coin is not just a fragment of copper-plated zinc but a stage upon which human psychology, history, and imagination perform. Value itself is a strange idea. Economists may insist it lies in scarcity, in supply and demand, in the metallic cost of production. Collectors may argue it rests in rarity, in condition, in mintage numbers and errors. Yet in truth, value lives in the mind. If a person believes a coin could change their life, that belief alone gives it force. A rumor that a 1994 D penny is worth $653 million, though wildly unrealistic, still carries power because it ignites possibility. For a moment, someone holding a penny in their palm imagines the world transformed. That tiny circle of metal becomes a key to freedom, security, or dreams. That spark is worth something, even if no auction will ever record it. The coin also teaches us about projection. People look at it and see different things. A child sees a toy or a token of luck. A historian sees Lincoln, emancipation, the endurance of a nation. A collector sees a slot to be filled in an album, a small but essential piece of a larger whole. An optimist sees fortune, a pessimist sees clutter. All of those views are true in their own way, and together they show how an object as small as a penny can mirror the human soul. There is also the mystery of time. A 1994 D penny has now been in circulation for more than a quarter century. Some remain bright, almost new, protected in rolls. Others are battered, scarred, their surfaces worn thin by endless exchanges. Each coin, though identical when struck, has taken a different journey. One might have passed through thousands of hands, another might have slept untouched in a desk drawer. When you pick one up today, you are holding not just a coin but a timeline, a secret history of travel and touch that you can never fully know. And then there is the irony of abundance. Because the 1994 D was struck in huge numbers, no single piece is rare in the conventional sense. Yet abundance itself becomes part of the story. The coin's very commonness is what allows it to infiltrate so many lives, to appear in so many jars, to become part of so many memories. A rare coin may be precious, but it is often hidden away, locked in cases, admired by few. A common penny like the 1994 D lives out loud, constantly touching the ordinary world. Its value is not in isolation, but in ubiquity. At the same time, myths and exaggerations attach themselves to it, as if humans cannot resist lifting the ordinary into the extraordinary. Perhaps this is our deepest instinct, to see treasure in plain sight, to believe that fortune might be hiding in our pockets. That is why stories of pennies worth millions go viral. They give shape to hope, they allow dreams to flow into the everyday. And though the numbers are false, the feeling is real. So what is the worth of a 1994 D penny? In dollars it is 1 cent, perhaps a few more if the condition is exceptional, a touch higher if a rare error can be proven. But in the currency of imagination, it is limitless. It is worth laughter shared between family members, worth childhood memories of sorting coins, worth the spark of curiosity that sends someone searching for history, worth the thrill of possibility when myths of millions cross their path. That is the paradox of value. It can be both trivial and infinite, depending on where you stand. The 1994 D penny may never sell for hundreds of millions, but it has already bought something rarer than money. It has bought wonder, stories, and meaning. And in the end, perhaps that is the greatest fortune a coin can hold. So the next time you find one in your pocket, stop for a moment. Turn it over. Let the light play across Lincoln's face and the tiny letters spelling out the ideals of a nation. Think of the billions like it, the countless hands it has touched, the myths it has inspired. In that small coin rests history, hope, and humanity. And whether it is worth a cent or a dream, the truth is simple. It has already earned its place in the great story of value itself.